I grew up in America, far from the traditions and beliefs of my ancestors in Africa. I had always seen myself as an American, never really connected to my roots in the distant village my parents came from. We lived in a part of America where the authorities were meticulous about managing wildlife. Reptiles, especially, were rarely seen, and anytime one was spotted, animal control was quick to act. But that wasn't my experience. It felt like snakes were everywhere around me. No matter how many times I called animal control, the issue persisted. It wasn't just in real life. I started seeing them in my dreams too. Snakes slithering around me wherever I went, hissing softly. As a Christian, I remembered the verse in Genesis chapter 3 from verse 14 to 15, where the serpent is cursed and made the enemy of man. To me, these snakes had to be a sign of something evil. And so one day, after calling animal control multiple times and getting frustrated, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I will never forget the day I found a large black snake hiding in my basement. Something snapped in me, and without thinking, I grabbed a heavy stick and killed it. The relief I felt at that moment was brief. In my dreams that night, I saw myself killing more snakes over and over. Each time I killed one, another appeared, hissing and glaring at me, feeling unnerved. I called my dad. Maybe he could explain why snakes seem to follow me everywhere. Dad, I began, I've been seeing snakes around the house for weeks, even in my dreams. And today I killed one in the basement. My dad's reaction shocked me. He screamed, You don't kill them! They don't hurt you. They are our ancestors visiting you. They even live among us. Stay with children when no one is around until an adult comes in. They come out time to time to greet strangers. What? I was dumbfounded. I thought he had misunderstood me. Dad, they are snakes. They scare me. Why would I let them stay around? Snakes don't harm us. They are sacred to our people, he insisted. At that moment, my aunt chipped in. She had been listening in on the conversation and said, Let me tell you the story of our people, child. You need to understand why we respect the snake. She began recounting the tale that had been passed down through generations. Our village, Omuagwo, meaning the sons of the snake, had a special relationship with snakes. Long ago, there was a terrible war between our people and another village. The enemy was much stronger and they wiped out almost everyone. Only one man, his wife, and the little child managed to escape. They ran and ran until they reached the bank of a large river, overflowing with water. They had nowhere else to go. If they turned back, the enemy would catch them. Suddenly, from the nearby bushes, they heard a sound, a rushing, slithering sound. When they looked closer, they saw a massive python that stretched across the river, creating a bridge for them to cross. With fear in their hearts, they crossed on the snake's back to the other side. When the enemy reached the river and tried to cross, mistaking the python for a log of wood, the snake moved, and they all fell into the water and drowned. From that day forward, our ancestors made a covenant with the snakes, calling them protectors and gods. Killing one was forbidden. If anyone killed a snake, they had to bury it with the same respect as a human being, or they would face severe consequences. After hearing the story, I was still skeptical. This is America. Not Africa, I told my aunt. I don't see why there would be any consequences here. My dad had warned me to be cautious. Just wait and see, he said. If nothing happens after 21 days, then maybe you're right. I shrugged it off. After all, I didn't believe in these ancestral stories. After that conversation, I decided to share the whole thing with my pastor, an American man. I trusted him and hoped he would have a solution. When I told him about the snakes and my family's belief that I should conduct a burial for a snake, he burst out laughing. A burial for a snake? He scoffed. He must be joking. There's no need to worry. That's just superstition. But as the days passed, I began to feel uneasy. On the 22nd day after I had killed the snake, something strange happened. It started with a tightness in my chest. At first, I thought it was just stress or a cold, but it got worse. I couldn't breathe properly. My heart pounded in my chest, and my body felt like it was shutting down. I was rushed to the ICU, barely able to hold on. Doctors couldn't find out what was wrong with me. They ran every test possible, but found no explanation. My condition continued to deteriorate, and I thought I was going to die. Then, something unexpected happened. While I was in the hospital, an African pastor from a nearby church came to visit one of his congregation members. When he passed by my room, he paused. Later, he told me he had heard the voice of the Lord telling him to pray for me and to break ancestral covenants. The pastor came into my room, and without knowing my story, he began to pray with intensity. He prayed for the breaking of ancestral covenants and bondages. Break, 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 he shouted. And on the third command, I felt something shift inside me. It was as if an invisible coil, something like the grip of a snake, was squeezing the life out of me. But as he prayed, the coil loosened and I could breathe again. My recovery was so sudden that the doctors were baffled. They couldn't explain how someone who was on the brink of death could suddenly be well again. But I knew the truth. The African pastor had prayed against the ancestral covenant, and the power of that prayer has set me free. From that day, I understood something important. While I was raised in America and had distanced myself from my African roots, the spiritual realities of my ancestry still held power. But more importantly, I learned that God's power is greater than any ancestral covenant. As my African pastor has said, if there is a man to pray, there is a God to answer. Now, whenever I reflect on that time, I remind myself, if I knew, I would not have killed the snake. Yet, in the end, it wasn't the snake that had power over me, it was God who saved me. And if you ever find yourself struggling with something that feels bigger than you, remember this. No matter where you come from, if you hold on to God, nothing can defeat you.
Thanks for watching. Support my channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, and turning on notifications to stay updated on new stories.